Show it to me. You'll never find that because that phrase was never used before that moment in that practice before I think game 3 of that series. And so that's when the term first started. Now, in terms of Del Harris, he used Robert Reed, a great 6'7" forward, as his ball handler initiator when he had Calvin Murphy on one wing and Mike Newland and these other great shooting guards coming off of screens.
At 70 years old now, Marcus Johnson is done playing nice. After a Hall of Fame career watching other players get the credit and respect he deserved, he is finally letting it all out. He has a list of 6 NBA players he hated, not disliked, hated. Real, deep, personal hatred born from insecurity, rejection, displacement, unfairness, and ego clashes that defined his entire career. He was That is how raw and honest his feelings were about some of these guys. For decades, Marcus kept this inside. He played the game, made his all-star teams, invented the point forward position, became one of the most creative scorers in NBA history, and kept his mouth shut. But now he wants people to understand what it really felt like to compete in the Golden Age, when the league was a war. Every game was psychological battle. Every opponent wanted to destroy you. These 6 men got under his skin the deepest. If you want more stories like this, hit the hype feature and give this video some hype. Stories about the real psychology of greatness, about the rivalries that shaped legends, do not get told enough. Show us some love with the hype feature and let us know you want more about these incredible athletes and the pain that made them. The thing about the golden age of basketball is that nobody talks about the darkness. People remember Magic and Bird lighting up the finals. People remember Michael Jordan soaring through the air. People remember the highlight reels and the championships and the moments that defined an era. But they do not remember the quiet resentment, the slow burning jealousy, the nights when players went home thinking about the guy who blocked their shot, took their credit, or disrespected them. They do not talk about how personal it all was, how every loss felt like a referendum on your worth as a human being, not just as a player. Marcus Johnson lived in that darkness. He was too good to be ignored, but not quite good enough to fully dominate. He was efficient, but not flashy. He was creative, but not celebrated. He was everything you needed on a basketball team, but not what the world wanted to see. And the 6 men on his hate list represented every way that darkness manifested, every rejection, every injustice, every moment when the world told him he was not enough. So let us start with the list. We are going backwards through his entire career, starting with the moment that gave him closure. The moment when the greatest player of all time admitted something Marcus Johnson had waited 40 years to hear. That is where this story truly ends. Number 1, Michael Jordan and the Space Jam validation. In the early 1980s, Marcus Johnson was the face of Adidas. He was the prototype for what a modern NBA wing could be. A young kid named Michael Jordan was watching, idolizing. Jordan was at UNC, dreaming about what he would become. The poster on his dorm room wall told the story. It was Marcus Johnson rising for a dunk. Johnson's law, what goes up must go in. That was what Jordan aspired to be. Jordan wanted to sign with Adidas because of Marcus Johnson. By 1995, everything was different. Jordan was the greatest player on the planet. He had 3 rings. He was filming Space Jam, built the Jordan Dome to train, and invited all the best talent to scrimmage. Marcus, 39 and retired, was on set as a cast member. One day during a scrimmage, Marcus managed to throw down a dunk. Jordan's competitive brain snapped on. He could not let the old guy outperform him. He barked, "Hey, old man, don't be trying to dunk. That wasn't part of your game." Marcus did not flinch. He looked Jordan in the eye and said, "Man, whatever I was doing, you had my poster on your wall in college. So I was doing something right." Jordan paused. He blushed, something that almost never happened. He was not used to losing verbal battles. But he knew the truth. He said, "You right. You right about that. I loved your game. I love your game in college." This moment became the validation Marcus had waited for his entire career. The greatest player of all time was admitting that Marcus had been his blueprint. This rivalry, if you can call it that, ended with respect. It ended with acknowledgement. It ended with closure. The Last Dance documentary later confirmed it. There was the Marcus Johnson poster on Jordan's college wall. Proof, evidence, validation. After being blocked by Wilkes, frozen out by Kareem, displaced by Moncrief, underrated by Irving, and tormented by Bird, Marcus finally heard the words he needed. Number 2, Larry Bird and the futility of control. Larry Bird was different from Michael Jordan. Jordan was greatness that surpassed everyone through pure superiority. But Bird was psychological warfare. Bird was calculated precision. Bird did not just say what he would do. He told you exactly how, when, and where. Then he did it. There was a specific moment that burned into Marcus's memory forever. Bird told him, I am going to go shoot this motherfucking jumper in your face right there in that corner. And it is going to be your Christmas present. Marcus heard it. He knew it was coming. He probably adjusted his defense. And it did not matter. Not one bit. Bird went exactly where he said. He took exactly the shot he promised. And it went in, just like he promised. For a defender of Marcus's caliber, this was not just a loss. This was psychological collapse. It stripped him of his agency. No matter what he did, no matter how hard he played, the outcome had already been decided. Bird had seen the future. Bird controlled the future. Marcus was just a passenger. That helplessness curdled into loathing. But it got worse. Marcus decided to get physical. Maybe he could throw Bird off rhythm by playing rough. It did not work. It backfired. During one game, when Marcus was playing physical defense, Bird did not complain to Marcus. He just turned to referee Jess Kersey, whom Bird called Red with familiar intimacy. Red, Red, get him off me, get him off me. Kersey immediately blew his whistle. 2 touch fouls. On Marquez. Marquez looked in disbelief. He realized that Bird controlled the officiating. The playing field was not level. It never would be. Bird was not just playing. Bird was controlling the entire environment. This was the hatred of helplessness. This was realizing that no matter how good you are, there are forces you cannot control. Bird forced Marquez to confront his own limitations. It was almost unbearable. The depth of Marquez's pain reached a breaking point. After one brutal loss where Bird had destroyed him psychologically, Marquez went to his hotel room and wrote a poem. This is not something most NBA players would do. But Marquez was an intellectual. He was thoughtful. He needed to process his emotions in a different way. The poem said, rule of thumb is to act real dumb and pretend there's nothing wrong. But if your senses are real, your mind's intact, it's hard to go along. It's out of my hands. Acquiesce to someone's demands. 'Cause only when the scale is grand do you find out who's really who. This poem was a window into his soul. It was an admission of vulnerability. It was Marquez saying, Bird has beaten me so thoroughly that I cannot even control my own emotions anymore. I am at his mercy, and I hate it. But there was also something else. The beginning of acceptance. Sometimes you face a force greater than yourself. The race element added another layer. The narrative around Bird was the Great White Hope. After hitting a game winner against the Bucks, Bird yelled at the Milwaukee bench, you can't put another white boy on me. I'm the coldest white boy in the league. You better put a brother on me. It was trash talk that used race as a weapon, and Marcus's response was grudging respect. He admitted he was right. He will forever be the coldest white guy to ever play the sport. The hatred transformed into awe. Bird was simply undeniable. Number 3. Julius Erving and the media that would not listen. Julius Erving was not a psychological tormentor like Bird. He was something different. He was the guy who got the credit that Marquez believed belonged to him. He was the guy who the media loved more. He was the guy who was cooler, more marketable, more exciting. He was the guy who played the sport the way the masses wanted it played, with dunks and highlight reels and style over substance. And that drove Marques Johnson absolutely insane. Marquez was a fundamentalist. He believed in efficiency. He believed in making the right play. He believed in points per shot. He believed in doing things the smart way, not the flashy way. But the world does not reward the smart way. The world rewards the exciting way. The world rewards the dunk over the jump shot. And that gap between what Marquez believed he deserved and what he actually received became the source of deep, simmering resentment. The crux of it all happened in the 1978-79 season. Marquez had an absolutely incredible year. He averaged 25.6 points per game. He shot 55% from the field. He had 7.6 rebounds per game. He had 3.0 assists per game. He was efficient. He was dominant. He was everything a basketball player should be. When the All-NBA selections were announced, Marquez was selected for the first team. Erving was also selected for the first team. So on paper, they were equals. They were both recognized as the best players in the league, but that is not how it felt to Marquez. The conversation around the selections was all about whether Erving should have been the first pick. The media was saying that the selections were close, that it could have gone either way, that Erving was the real star. Marcus had put up better numbers. Marcus had been more efficient. Marcus had done everything better from a pure basketball standpoint. But Irving was cooler. Irving was the high-flying icon who had legitimized the ABA and the slam dunk as an art form. Irving was the face of the league, and that counted for something in a way that Marques's statistics never could. So Marcus took immense combative pride in beating Irving for that spot. He felt like he had to constantly prove that he was the superior basketball player, even if Irving was the superior star. This became a rivalry where Marquez was always trying to out-argue people to make them see what he saw, that he was better, that he was more deserving, that the media was wrong about Irving. This rivalry came to a head in 1981 during the Eastern Conference semifinals. It was a 7-game war between the Bucks and the 76ers. In Game 2, Irving had a terrible game. He scored only 18 points on poor shooting. He was inefficient. He looked human. When the media rushed to interview Marquez after the game, they asked him the obvious question. Did you finally find the formula to stop Dr. J? Marcus had a chance. He had a chance to gloat. He had a chance to say, yes, we shut him down. We won. We proved that he is not as great as everyone thinks. But that is not what he said. Instead, he said something that sounds generous on the surface, but was actually deeply dismissive. Heck, no one should walk around and say they stopped Irving. The difference was that Sunday they went in, and tonight they rimmed the basket and went out. On the surface, it sounds like Marquez is giving Irving credit. Like he is saying it is not about defense, it is just about whether shots fall. But what Marquez was really saying was this. Irving is just another player who misses shots. He is not a god. He is not supernatural. He is just a guy who got lucky some nights and unlucky other nights. It was a refusal to grant Irving the mystique that everyone else granted him. It was Marquez saying, I see through this. I see that he is just a human being playing basketball, and the media has convinced everyone that he is something more. But in doing so, Marquez revealed his own insecurity. He was bothered by the idea that Irving could miss shots and still be graded on a curve, that his failures were attributed to bad luck and his successes to destiny. Marcus wanted to be great in the way that Bird was great, in the way that Jordan would be great. He wanted to be undeniable, but he was always going to be the guy that people debated about, that people questioned, that people compared to others. The hatred of Irving was the hatred of injustice. It was the anger at a system that valued style over substance. It was the resentment of a player who knew he was better, but could never convince the world of it because the world did not want to be convinced. The world wanted the dunk. The world wanted the highlight reel. The world wanted Julius Irving. And Marcus Johnson could score 25 points on 55% shooting all season long, and it still would not be enough. This is the kind of hatred that eats at you for decades. It is not the kind that fades with time because the injustice never goes away. The All-NBA spot could have gone either way. The narrative could have celebrated Marquez's efficiency instead of doubting it. The media could have acknowledged that he was doing more with less, that he was the smarter player, the more fundamental player, but they did not. And so Marquez carried this resentment through his entire career. Every time he saw Irving get praised, every time he saw the highlight reel dunks replayed, every time the media chose style over substance, it was another cut. Another confirmation that the game did not work the way it should. That excellence was not rewarded fairly. That sometimes it did not matter how good you were if you were not the kind of good that people wanted to watch. Number 4. Sidney Moncrief and the Loss of the Throne. If the rivalries with Irving and Bird were about external forces, about media narratives and official decisions, then the rivalry with Sidney Moncrief was internal. It was about the person who shared Marcus's locker room. It was about a teammate. And that made it so much worse because it revealed something about Marquez that he probably did not want to admit about himself. It revealed that he was jealous. It revealed that he cared about his own status more than he cared about his team winning. It revealed that he was petty. It revealed that he could not handle being second. From 1977 through 1980, Marcus Johnson was the undisputed franchise player for the Milwaukee Bucks. He was the primary scorer. He was the face of the team on the ticket stubs and the posters in the arena. He was the engine of Coach Don Nelson's offense. He was an MVP candidate. He was the sun, and the entire Bucks organization orbited around him. This was his team. This was his time. This was his legacy in the making. He owned Milwaukee. Then Sidney Moncrief arrived, drafted in 1979. Moncrief was a different kind of player than Marquez. Moncrief was relentless. Moncrief was high motor. Moncrief was defense first. Moncrief was the consummate professional and the darling of basketball purists. Moncrief was humble. Moncrief was the model citizen, everything that Marquez was not, or everything that Marquez did not want to be. Moncrief was the anti-Marquez. By the 1981 to 82 season, something shifted. Don Nelson, an innovator who was always tweaking his system, began designing more plays for Moncrief. The offensive focus shifted. The ball movement changed. The team began to run the offense through to Moncrief instead of through Marcus, and Marcus was asked to do something he did not want to do. He was asked to take a secondary scoring role. He was asked to facilitate more. He was asked to shoot less. He was asked to defer to the younger guard. For Marcus Johnson, this was a profound insult. He was in his prime. He believed he was a top 5 talent in the league. And now he was being told that his role was shrinking, that his importance was diminishing, that the young guy was the future. This was not about basketball. This was about ego. This was about status. This was about who owned the franchise. And Marcus was losing the fight for ownership. The hatred grew more intense when Marquez realized that Moncrief was not just ascending, but that he was becoming the darling of the media narrative. Moncrief was the hard-working guy. Moncrief was the defensive specialist. Moncrief was winning Defensive Player of the Year awards. Moncrief was getting MVP votes. The narrative was shifting from Marquez Johnson's Bucks to Sidney Moncrief's Bucks. And Marquez could not do anything about it, because Moncrief was actually excellent. He could not even really complain because the stats showed that they were winning. They were averaging over 50 wins a season. They were reaching Eastern Conference Finals. The team was good, but the resentment was real. It was the resentment of a guy who felt like his contributions were being undervalued, like his efficiency, his rebounding, his passing, all of it was being ignored because there was a shiny new object in Moncrief's defense and tenacity. In the 1979 to 80 season, Marcus averaged 21.7 points and Moncrief averaged 8.5 as a rookie. Johnson owned the team. By 1980 to 81, Moncrief was up to 14.0 points. Marquez dipped to 20.3. The shift was beginning, but the flip, the real flip, came in 1981 to 82. That season, Moncrief averaged 19.8 points, and Marquez dropped to 16.5. For the first time, Moncrief was the leading scorer. Marquez was second fiddle. By 1982 to 83, Moncrief was at 22.5, and Marquez was at 21.4. Moncrief had won. He had taken the throne, and Marcus had to sit there and watch it happen every single day, in the same locker room, every practice, every game, every moment. The hatred of Moncrief was the hatred of displacement. It was not the hatred of an enemy. It was the hatred of being replaced by someone you have to share a locker room with. It was the hatred of professional jealousy boiling over in silence, game after game, season after season. It was the hatred of watching your star fade while someone else's rises. And it only ended when Marcus was traded to the Clippers in 1984. Finally, he did not have to watch Moncrief wear the Bucks uniform. Finally, he did not have to be reminded every day that he had lost his throne. What made the Moncrief rivalry different was that it was purely internal conflict. With Wilkes, Bird, Kareem, Jordan, and Irving, Marcus could blame external circumstances. He could blame the coaches, the media, the referees. But with Moncrief, there was no one to blame but himself. Moncrief was younger. Moncrief was hungrier. Moncrief was ascending while Marquez declined. There was no mystery to it. The old guard gets replaced by the new. And sometimes you are on the wrong side of that transition. Number 5, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the idol that rejected you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was different from all the others. With Wilkes, it was about insecurity. With Moncrief, it was about displacement. With Irving, it was about media bias. With Bird, it was about psychological torture. But with Kareem, it was about something more primal. It was about the pain of loving someone and being rejected by them. It was about idolizing a god and having that god look at you with complete indifference. It was the most personal pain of all. Marcus Johnson grew up idolizing Lou Alcindor, who later became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. As a young kid in Los Angeles, Marcus saw Alcindor and thought, that is what I want to be. That is the template. That is the blueprint for perfection. Kareem was a UCLA legend. He had conquered the NBA. He was the ultimate representation of what basketball excellence could look like. For Marquez, he was a hero. He was someone to look up to. He was someone to study. He was someone to become. He was the ceiling for what Marquez could achieve. When Marquez was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks in 1977, he was stepping directly into the vacuum left by Kareem's departure. Kareem had left Milwaukee 2 years earlier, and his acrimonious exit created all kinds of tension. But Marquez saw an opportunity. He was stepping into the same franchise where his hero had played. He was following in the same footsteps. Maybe Marquez thought he could have a conversation with Kareem. Maybe they could connect. Maybe Marquez could ask Kareem for guidance. Maybe they could become something like mentor and student. Maybe they could build a relationship rooted in the shared UCLA experience. Maybe Kareem would see himself in Marquez and offer some wisdom, some connection, some acknowledgement that he mattered. Instead, Marquez encountered a wall. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was cold. He was distant. He was aloof. Marcus, who was charismatic and media-friendly and open, came up against a personality that was the exact opposite. Kareem did not smile. Kareem did not make small talk. Kareem did not acknowledge people. If you walked past Kareem on the street and said hello, he would walk right past you. If you tried to have a conversation with him, he would look through you. He would treat you like you were not even there. And this was not just something that happened occasionally. This was his entire demeanor. This was who he was. Year after year, season after season, same cold silence. Players described Kareem as sounding more like a chemistry professor than an NBA player. He maintained a stoic, intellectual distance that many people interpreted as arrogance. Some people thought he was a jerk. Some people thought he did not care about other human beings. But what they were really seeing was a man who had built a wall around himself. Kareem had experienced the weight of being America's most famous black athlete in an era where that came with a lot of baggage. He had been scrutinized. He had been racialized. He had been commodified by the media since he was a teenager in New York. His aloofness was not rudeness. It was survival. It was a protective shell built to withstand a hostile world. But Marquez did not understand this. Marquez only knew that the guy he idolized would not even look at him. The guy he wanted to connect with treated him like he was invisible. Marquez took it personally. He interpreted Kareem's protective silence as personal antipathy. He thought, I am not good enough for him. I am not worthy of his time. He does not think I belong in the same league as him. Every time he saw Kareem and got no acknowledgement, it was another cut, another rejection, another reminder that the man he worshipped did not even see him. The hatred that Marquez felt toward Kareem was the hatred of rejection. It was the pain of offering your admiration and having it thrown back in your face. It was the bitterness of a fan being ignored by his hero. It fueled a competitive fire in Marquez to topple the idol who would not acknowledge him, to prove that he was good enough, to prove that he belonged, to prove that he could compete at the same level as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whether Kareem noticed or not. The hatred was Marquez trying to prove that Kareem was wrong to ignore him. It was only decades later that Marquez came to understand what was really going on. Through conversations with Magic Johnson and other players, Marquez eventually learned that Kareem's coldness was not about him. It was about Kareem's migraines. It was about Kareem's deep mistrust of the public sphere. It was about Kareem carrying the weight of the civil rights era and the Vietnam War, and decades of being treated as a symbol rather than a person. But during their playing days, all Marquez knew was that the greatest player he had ever idolized would not even say hello to him, and that hurt in a way that was almost impossible to describe. Number 6. Jamal Wilkes and the Tears That Built a Legend. And we come back to the beginning, to UCLA, to 1973, to a gymnasium in Westwood where a young prodigy named Marcus Johnson arrived with all the confidence in the world and left questioning his own existence as a basketball player. This is truly where it all started. Marcus Johnson was the Los Angeles City Section 4 A Division Player of the Year. He was 6 feet 7 inches tall. He was a phenom. He had dominated his peers his entire life. He had never known failure. He had never been blocked by someone better. He had never been made to look foolish on a basketball court. He walked into UCLA expecting to compete for a starting spot. He walked into UCLA expecting to be the future of the Bruins. He walked into UCLA expecting to continue the dominance he had known his entire life. Instead, he encountered Jamal "Silk" Wilkes. Wilkes was a senior. Wilkes was a consensus All-American. Wilkes played for John Wooden, the greatest coach in the history of basketball. Wilkes was efficient. Wilkes was long. Wilkes was skilled. And Wilkes had absolutely no interest in making Marcus Johnson feel good about himself. During Marcus's first week of practice, something shocking happened. Wilkes proceeded to block virtually every shot that Marquez attempted. This was not a competitive loss. This was not Marquez just having a bad day. This was a systematic deconstruction of Marquez's entire identity as a scorer. Everything he had ever believed about himself, every ounce of confidence he had built up over his entire basketball life, was being dismantled in real time by a senior, by a kid he had never heard of, by someone who was supposed to respect him as an incoming superstar. But there was no respect. There was just the sound of the ball being rejected, over and over again, shot after shot. Marcus would go up, Wilkes would block it, Marcus would try again, Wilkes would block it again. This went on for days, and with each block, Marcus felt smaller. With each rejection, his confidence eroded. With each failed attempt, he questioned whether he belonged at UCLA, whether he belonged in Division I basketball, whether he was actually good at basketball at all. And then it reached a breaking point. After a particularly brutal week of practices where he could barely get a shot off, Marcus went home and broke down. He wept. He cried. This is not something that many people talk about, especially not tough guys, especially not players who want to be seen as strong. But Marcus Johnson at 17 or 18 years old was reduced to tears by Jamal Wilkes. He went to his parents' house and he told his father, "I can't play here. These guys are too good. I made a mistake coming to UCLA. I don't belong here." This moment is the genesis of Marcus Johnson's entire career. This moment is where his competitiveness was born. This moment is where his insecurity was revealed. He hated Wilkes, not because Wilkes was a bad person. Wilkes was by all accounts a quiet, respectful teammate. He hated Wilkes because Wilkes represented everything he feared about himself. That maybe he was not as good as he thought. That maybe there were guys out there better than him. That maybe his entire identity as a basketball player was built on a false foundation. His father gave him wisdom that day. His father said that Wilkes was probably the best forward in the entire country, that surviving against him would make Marcus better, that if he could learn to compete at Wilkes's level, he could compete at anyone's level. These words planted a seed that said, this pain is not a defeat. This pain is a gift. This pain is going to make you great. So Marcus stuck it out, and he learned. He learned to use his body to shield the ball. He learned to embrace physical contact. He learned to rely on efficiency rather than flashiness. He learned the things that would later define his entire career as a point forward. He learned these things by being forced to adapt to Jamal Wilkes' dominance. He learned these things in tears and frustration, in the depths of his own insecurity. And when Wilkes graduated, Marcus ascended. He became the star. He became the face of the Bruins. And in a gesture that spoke volumes, Marcus Johnson later wore the number 54, the same number that was retired for Jamal Wilkes. He created a lineage of excellence. He acknowledged that Wilkes had not just been his rival, Wilkes had been his crucible. Wilkes had been the fire that had to burn in order to forge him into the player he became. So Marcus Johnson includes Wilkes on his hate list, not because Wilkes was evil or mean, but because Wilkes forced him to confront his own insecurity. Wilkes forced him to ask himself if he was good enough, and Wilkes forced him to find the answer within himself. The hatred of Wilkes was the hatred of necessary pain. It was the hatred of a rival who had to break him down in order to build him up. And in the end, that is what all of this was about. The hatred, the insecurity, the jealousy, the resentment, the helplessness, the ego clashes. They were all part of the same story. The story of a player who never quite got the credit he deserved. A player who was always just slightly overshadowed. A player who had to constantly prove his worth against rivals who seemed to get it all so much easier. Marcus Johnson's hatred for these 6 men was real. It was deep. It was rooted in psychology and pain and the brutal realities of competition at the highest level. But at the end of the day, his hatred was also the fuel that made him great. The friction between Marquez and Wilkes sharpened his game. The rejection by Kareem motivated him. The displacement by Moncrief made him fight harder. The media bias surrounding Irving made him more efficient. The psychological warfare of Bird made him mentally tougher. And the eventual validation from Jordan made it all worth it. Marcus Johnson is 70 years old now. He has lived a full life. He has a real legacy. He is remembered as one of the greatest to ever play the game. He made the Hall of Fame. He invented the point forward position. He changed the way basketball is played. He showed that a player could be a creator and a scorer at the same time. He proved that intelligence and efficiency could be just as valuable as flashiness and athleticism. But what matters most to him, what he needed to say at this stage of his life, was that none of it came easy. Every bit of it was earned. Every achievement was fought for. And the people he hated most often made him most human. They showed him his limitations. They forced him to grow. They made him stronger through pain. The 6 men on this list will never fully understand what they meant to Marcus Johnson. They do not know how much they fueled him. They do not know how much their rejection and disrespect pushed him to become more than he thought possible. But at 70, Marquez is at peace with it, or at understanding. He realizes the hate was never really about hate. It was about love. It was about caring so much that disrespect cut deeper than anything else. It was about ambition that could never be satisfied. Maybe that hunger was his greatest gift. Maybe the hatred, processed correctly, became motivation. Maybe the pain became wisdom. Now Marquez can see it clearly. The 6 men were not enemies. They were teachers. They showed him what he was capable of when pushed to his limit. But Marquez knows, and now at 70, he is finally telling the world.
We barely game plan for Chicago. They
stays inbound. That look says it all.
He organizes guys in the summer.
I can't stand him sounds harsh. But Kevin McHale's real problem was never just one player. It started with James Harden. McHale coached him in Houston. He saw the talent up close. He saw the scoring. He saw the passing. But he did not see a leader. So in the summer of 2015, McHale went on television and said it out loud. He said Harden was not a leader. He said a winning team needs a voice, someone who can demand defense and effort from everyone. He said Harden could not be that voice. Then he told a darker story. He said Harden showed up to camp the next year fat and did not feel like playing. The team started slow, McHale got fired, and Harden hit back fast. He called McHale a clown. That is where this story begins. But it is not where it ends. And if you like stories where legends say the quiet part out loud, give this video some hype because this one only gets more uncomfortable from here. Kevin McHale was a Celtics legend. He was a Hall of Famer. He was one of the most skilled post players the game has ever seen. But when it came to respect, he did not hand it out easily. He judged players by old rules: toughness, humility, conditioning, defense, team success. That made his opinions sharp, and sometimes it made them unfair. To understand why McHale was so hard on people, you have to understand his code, because McHale did not just hate at random. He had a system. He had a way of deciding who deserved his respect and who did not. And that system was built in a brutal time, by a brutal man, in a brutal league. His code had 3 main parts. The first part was accountability. McHale believed a real leader uses his voice. He believed a leader looks his teammates in the eye and demands more, not with stats, not with quiet effort, with words, with pressure, with the courage to call out a teammate who is not pulling his weight. To McHale, leading by example was not enough. You had to lead out loud. The second part was physical discipline. McHale believed a pro should always be ready to play. That meant staying in shape. That meant fighting through pain. That meant treating your body like a tool for winning, not a thing to protect. McHale played on a broken foot in 1987. He sacrificed his own health to win. So when he saw players rest or show up out of shape, it offended him deeply. The third part was humility about history. McHale believed greatness is something other people give you. It is not something you take for yourself. In his mind, you let the fans, the writers, and your rivals call you great. You do not call yourself great. The moment you do, you have broken the code. And these rules did not come from nowhere. They were forged in the toughest era the league has ever seen. The 1980s NBA was a war. The Celtics, the Lakers, and the Pistons fought like armies. The defense was brutal. The fouls were hard. There was a code in every locker room, a wall of silence and toughness that outsiders never saw. You kept your distance from rivals, you hid your injuries, you protected your team's secrets, you earned everything through pain. McHale grew up inside that world. It shaped every belief he holds. So when he judges a modern player, he is not using rules he made up. He is using the rules that were beaten into him game after game, season after season, in a league that did not care about your feelings. These 3 rules sound simple, but they were also a trap, because they only fit one kind of player. They fit the kind of player McHale used to be, and McHale felt he had earned the right to judge everyone else by them. He had reason to feel that way. McHale was not just talking. He had the career to back it up. He played 13 seasons, all with Boston. He won 3 titles. He made the All-Star team 7 times. He was named to the All-Defensive team 6 times. He was so good off the bench that he won 6th Man of the Year twice before he even became a full starter. His rise tells the story on its own. He did not arrive as a superstar. He grew into one year by year through pure work. He went from scoring around 18 points a game to nearly 20, then 21, and finally a huge 26 points a night at his peak. His rebounds climbed as he got stronger. His blocks climbed too, all the way past 2 a game. He went from a deadly bench weapon to a first-team All-NBA force. In that Magic 1987 season, he even finished 4th in the vote for Most Valuable Player. He kept making the all-defensive first team year after year, proving he could guard as well as he could score. This was no fluke and no one-year shine. It was a long, patient climb to the very top of the sport, and that climb is the root of his attitude. He had earned every inch of it the hard way. So in his mind, he had every right to tell younger players how the job should be done. And his game was a thing of beauty. People called him the torture chamber. Once he caught the ball on the low block, the defender was finished. He had moves on top of moves, a fake, then a spin, then a counter, then another counter. His arms were so long that his shots could not be blocked. Defenders knew what was coming and still could not stop it. The numbers were stunning too. In the 1986 and 1987 season, McHale did something no one had ever done. He shot over 60% from the field and over 80% from the free throw line in the same year. No player in NBA history had ever paired those two marks. And he did it while taking nearly 17 shots a night. He was not just efficient on easy looks, he was efficient on a heavy load. His true shooting percentage that year was 65.5%. That was the 4th highest mark ever for a player who scored 2,000 points in a season. And remember, the league average that year was only 53.8%. McHale was not a little better than his peers. He was miles ahead. This is why McHale looked down on modern scoring. He had a famous line about it. He said scoring a lot of points was actually the least impressive thing a player could do. Because points, he argued, just come from how many shots you take and how long you hold the ball. To McHale, anyone could pile up points if they shot enough. Real value came from efficiency, defense, and winning. So now you see the problem. McHale had a code. He had the career to prove the code worked for him, and he had a sharp tongue. Put those things together, and you get a man who could be brilliant and bitter at the same time. A man who could teach you the game and tear you down in the same breath. Which brings us back to James Harden. This was the strongest clash of McHale's coaching life. The two men were together in Houston from 2012 to 2015. On paper, it should have worked. Harden was a young, brilliant scorer. McHale was a Hall of Fame teacher of the game, but their values did not match. And in the end, that gap blew the whole thing apart. The trouble came to a head in the 2015 playoffs. Houston was in the Western Conference semifinals against the Los Angeles Clippers. It was Game 6. The Rockets were trying to claw back into the series. And in the 4th quarter, during the comeback, McHale did something a coach almost never does to his star. He benched Harden. He sat his best player while the team fought to win. That move told everyone how McHale really felt. He did not fully trust Harden to lead the charge. Houston actually won that series, but the message had already been sent. And the following summer, McHale made it public. He went on the show Open Court and spoke plainly. He said Harden could do amazing things. He could score. He could pass. He could carry an offense. But he was not a leader. McHale said, a real title team needs a vocal leader. It needs someone who can stand up and demand defense from everyone else. And in McHale's eyes, Harden could not do that. He tried to lead by example, but he could not command the room. Then came the part that stung the most. McHale said that the next season, Harden showed up to training camp out of shape. He used a hard word. He said Harden came in fat and did not feel like playing. The team started 4-7, and 11 games into the year, McHale was fired. In McHale's telling, the lack of effort from his star helped cost him his job. He even hinted that Harden had a plan and that the plan did not include him. Think about how deep that cut goes. McHale was not just saying Harden played badly, he was saying Harden chose comfort over the team. He was saying a star let his coach take the fall. In McHale's world, that is the worst sin of all. It breaks the first pillar of his code, the one about accountability. A leader is supposed to carry the blame, not pass it on. A leader is supposed to demand more from himself before he demands it from anyone else. McHale looked at Harden and saw the opposite. He saw a brilliant talent who would not own the hard parts of leading. And to a man who built his whole life on owning the hard parts, that was unforgivable. Harden did not stay quiet. He fired back and called McHale a clown. he attacked Mikhail's character. He made it clear he did not respect the man who had just questioned his leadership. The two of them were now on opposite sides of a deep divide. One man valued vocal leadership and grit. The other valued his own game and his own way. Here is where we have to be fair to both sides. Mikhail may have had a point. Leadership and conditioning do matter. A star who is out of shape does let his team down, and history would show that Harden's teams often fell short in big moments. So Mikhail was not crazy, but there is another way to read this. Mikhail was a coach who got fired, and when a coach gets fired, it is easy to blame the star. It is easy to say the player did not care enough. It is easy to make yourself the wise old voice and the player the spoiled kid. Mikhail's words were sharp, but they also came from a man whose job was gone. That does not make him wrong, but it does make him human. And it shows how quickly his code could turn into a weapon. That is the pattern you will see again and again. Mikhail picks a real flaw. Then he hits it harder than the moment deserves. Look at what he did with LeBron James. In 2016, LeBron led the Cleveland Cavaliers to a title. It was one of the greatest comebacks in finals history. They came back from down 3-1 against a 73-win Warriors team. It was a huge moment. And in the glow of that win, LeBron spoke about himself in the highest terms. He talked about being the greatest. He branded himself the best ever. Mikhail could not stand it. To him, this broke the third rule of his code, the rule about humility. Mikhail called the self-praise disrespectful, not disrespectful to him. Disrespectful to the legends who came before. In Mikhail's view, you do not crown yourself. Other people crown you. He pointed to the giants of the past. He named Bill Russell. He named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He named Michael Jordan. He named Larry Bird. He named Magic Johnson. All of them ruled the league. All of them changed the game. And in Mikhail's memory, none of them stood up and called themselves the greatest. They let the world say it for them. That, to Mikhail, was the right way. So Mikhail judged LeBron not for his play, but for his words. And again, you can see his point. There is something classy about letting your work speak. There is something old-fashioned and noble about it. But there is also a blind spot here. Mikhail was judging a new world by old rules. The league had changed. By LeBron's time, players were brands. They had shoe deals, social media, and businesses. Speaking up for yourself was part of the job. Confidence was not seen as disrespect, it was seen as power. Mikhail could not accept that shift. He treated belief in yourself as an insult to the past. He took a normal piece of modern athlete behavior and called it a sin. That tells you less about LeBron and more about Mikhail. He was a man frozen in his own era, judging a player who lived in a different one. And the gap between those eras was huge. Think about how the game changed. In Mikhail's day, you kept a cold distance from your rivals. You did not hug them. You did not trade jerseys after a game. You did not post about them. You played hurt, and you hid your pain, because showing weakness was a crime. Now the game looks totally different. Players shake hands before the game even starts. They swap jerseys when it ends. They rest healthy bodies to stay fresh for the playoffs. They control their own stories online. They build brands worth millions. None of that is wrong, it is just new. But to Mikhail, every piece of it looked soft. Every piece of it broke a rule he had lived by. So when he attacked LeBron's words, he was really attacking the whole new world those words came from. The same stubborn streak showed up with Draymond Green. Draymond is one of the best defenders of the modern game. He is the heart of a Warriors team that won 4 titles. He can guard all 5 positions. He is smart, tough, and fearless. And at one point, Draymond made a bold claim. He said he could guard any post player from any era, any size, any style, any decade. Mikhail heard that and laughed it off. His reply was short and brutal. He said Draymond could not grow enough to guard him. Mikhail was not joking about size. He stood 6'10" with a wingspan close to 8 feet. That length is what made him the torture chamber. He used his height and his reach to shoot over anyone. Draymond is listed at 6'6". To Mikhail, that gap was the whole story. He believed he would simply shoot over Draymond all night. He believed his footwork and his post moves would crush a smaller man. And maybe he was right. Maybe Mikhail really would have scored on Draymond in the post. He was that skilled and that big. But look at what Mikhail did in that answer. He took one of the smartest defenders in basketball and reduced him to a number on a height chart. He did not talk about Draymond's brain. He did not talk about his timing, his hands, or his nerve. He just talked about inches. That is the bias of an old-school big man. To McHale, defense in the post was about size and muscle, not cleverness and movement. This is McHale's discomfort with small ball laid bare. The modern game rewards quick, switchable defenders like Draymond. The old game rewarded huge, grinding bigs like McHale. He could not give the new style its due. He measured a modern great by a yardstick built for 1985. There is a deep irony here too. Draymond won by doing the exact things McHale claimed to love. He played team-first basketball, he sacrificed his own stats for winning. He talked on defense and held his teammates to a high bar. He was loud, vocal, and demanding. The very leadership McHale said Harden lacked in many ways. Draymond lived parts of McHale's own code. But because he did it in a small body, in a small ball world, McHale could not see it. The shape of the player blinded him to the spirit of the player. He was so locked on size that he missed the toughness staring right back at him. To really feel how narrow McHale's view could be, you have to go back even further. You have to go to his battles with Jack Sikma. Sikma is a name many young fans do not know, but he was a star. He was a Hall of Fame big man who played for Seattle and Milwaukee. He won a title, he made 7 All-Star teams, and he played a smart, modern kind of game for his time. Sikma was a finesse big. He liked to face the basket. He had a clean jump shot. He could step out and play what we now call pick and pop. He used skill and angles more than brute force. In many ways, he was ahead of his time. Big men today play just like he did. But McHale did not respect that style. McHale was a grinder. He lived on the low block, he punished people in the paint, he believed a big man should bang, bump, and bully his way to points. So when he faced a finesse player like Sikma, he did not see a fellow craftsman. He saw a soft player who avoided the real fight. Their battles in the paint were not just about points. They were about 2 ideas of what a big man should be. McHale tried to drag Sikma into a physical war. He wanted to expose him. He wanted to prove that grit beats finesse. To McHale, the jump shot and the face-up game were almost a kind of cheating. They let a big man dodge the dirty work, and this is where you really see how tight McHale's box was. Sikma was great, but because he did not punish people the way McHale did, he did not earn full respect. McHale's idea of toughness was so narrow that it left no room for a different path to greatness. If you did not win the way he won, in the place he won it, you were not truly tough. That is a very small door to walk through. And the saddest part is what McHale missed. The game would later prove Sikma right. The big men of today shoot threes, they face up, they pop out for jumpers, they space the floor just like Sikma did. The finesse style McHale dismissed did not die. It took over. It became the way modern basketball is played. So McHale was not just being hard on one rival, he was being hard on the future itself. He looked at a man who was ahead of his time and called him soft for it. That is the danger of a closed mind. It cannot tell the difference between a coward and a pioneer. But McHale did not save his sharpest words for one man. Sometimes his target was a whole team, and no team got under his skin like the 1990s Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are remembered as the greatest dynasty of their time. Michael Jordan led them to 6 titles. They are loved by millions. But McHale looked at them and felt something close to disgust, and the reason was loyalty to an old rival. Before the Bulls ruled the league, the Detroit Pistons did. People called them the Bad Boys. They played rough, hard, mean defense. They hit you, they knocked you down. And they beat Jordan's Bulls in the playoffs for years before the Bulls finally broke through. When the documentary The Last Dance came out, it told the story from the Bulls' side. It painted the Pistons as villains. It framed their hard defense as dirty, almost as thuggery. And McHale could not take it. McHale defended the Pistons. He said you could see exactly why Detroit did not like Chicago. He said the Bulls complained all the time. They moaned about the physical play. They acted like getting hit was a crime. And to McHale, that was weak. That was disrespectful to what the Pistons had built. In McHale's eyes, the Bulls were rewriting history. They were taking hard, honest playoff defense and calling it cheating. He felt that his own Celtics never did that. When Boston faced the rough Pistons, they did not whine. They embraced the war. They believed the physical battle made them better. So when McHale saw the Bulls cry foul, decades later in a film, he saw a soft team dressing up an excuse. You have to understand what those Pistons meant to a man like McHale. They were enemies, yes, but they were honest enemies. They hit you, and they let you hit back. There was a strange respect in that violence. Both teams knew the deal. Both teams paid the price. So when the Bulls later painted the Pistons as dirty criminals, McHale felt they were insulting a brotherhood of pain that he was part of too. An attack on the bad boys felt like an attack on his whole era. He was not really defending Detroit. He was defending the only kind of basketball he ever believed in. The hard kind, the kind that left marks. He even defended one of the most hated moments in NBA history. In 1991, after the Bulls finally beat them, the Pistons walked off the court without shaking hands. Most fans saw that as classless, as sore loser behavior. But McHale said it was normal for his era. He said that back in the 1980s, after a series-ending game, players almost never spoke to each other. He said in most of the series his team won, he did not say a word to anyone. There were no hugs, no jersey swaps, you just walked off. To him, the Pistons did nothing wrong. This is where McHale can sound the most bitter. The Bulls won. They became the team of the decade. They earned their place in history. But McHale could not let go of the 1980s. He viewed everything through a Celtics and Pistons lens. He defended a walk-off that the whole world had moved past. He judged a new dynasty by the manners of his own time. It was loyalty, yes. But it was also a man who refused to update his view of the world. And then there is the most personal clash of all. Kevin Love. This one is different, because McHale did not just coach or commentate here. He was the executive who brought Love in. In 2008, McHale was running the Minnesota Timberwolves as their head of basketball operations. On draft night, he made the trade that landed Kevin Love. McHale chose him. He bet on it. But the relationship went sour fast. McHale and his staff did not like what they saw from the young big man. They questioned his defense. They questioned his stance, his effort, his conditioning. To them, Love was not putting in the work on the hard end of the floor. Now Love was producing on offense. He was a double-double machine. He grabbed rebounds by the bucket. He scored. He stuffed the box score. By the numbers, he looked like a rising star. But McHale was not impressed, and his reason goes straight back to his code. He argued that big stats on a losing team do not mean much. Minnesota was not winning. They were stuck near the bottom. So to McHale, Love's gaudy numbers were a bit empty. He believed that real respect comes from winning, not from personal stats on a team going nowhere. He even suggested that modern players cared more about their own numbers and their next contract than about the team. He saw Love as proof of that idea. A player chasing double-doubles while the team sank. But once again, we have to push back on McHale here. Love was young, he was on a poor team with little help. A player can only do so much on a roster that is not built to win. Judging him by team success was almost unfair, because the team was broken before Love ever arrived. McHale was holding a single player responsible for a whole organization's failure, and he was the one who helped build that organization. There is a strange knot in this one. McHale picked Love. McHale traded for him on draft night. So when McHale ran him down for weak defense and soft conditioning, he was also judging his own choice. He bet on the player, then blamed the player when the bet did not pay off fast enough. It is a bit like a man who builds a house on sand and then blames the house for sinking. Love did put up real numbers. He worked on the parts of his game that he was good at, but none of it counted in McHale's ledger, because the wins were not there. And the wins were not there, partly because of choices McHale himself had made as the man in charge. So that is the pattern across all six: Harden, LeBron, Draymond, Sigma, the Bulls, and Love. In every case, McHale found a real flaw. And in every case, he hammered that flaw with a hardness that said more about his code than about the player. But here's the twist. McHale was not a man who hated everyone. He was not just a grumpy old legend swinging at the modern game. He had deep respect for certain players. And looking at who he respected tells you just as much as looking at who he did not. Start with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. McHale's respect for Kareem was total. He called him one of the greatest ever, full stop. And he was sad that younger fans forget him. McHale felt that Kareem gets left out of the greatest ever talk for a silly reason. Not because of his play, but because he did not have the flashy, made-for-TV charm of a Jordan or a LeBron. McHale thought that was unfair to a true giant, and McHale spoke from experience. He had to guard Kareem. He admitted that Kareem was a player he simply could not stop. He remembered how, in the tightest finals games, the Lakers would just hand the ball to Kareem on the right block. And from there, the skyhook was unstoppable. McHale was one of the best defenders alive, and he tipped his cap. That is real respect, earned in battle. And notice what kind of greatness won McHale over. Kareem did not boast. He did not brand himself. He just kept dropping that skyhook year after year and let the results do the talking. He was quiet, steady, and deadly. He carried his teams in the biggest moments without ever pounding his own chest. That was everything. McHale wished the modern stars would be a giant who let his game speak and his trophies do the bragging. In Kareem, McHale saw the perfect answer to LeBron. One man took his crown by force of words. The other had it placed on his head by everyone who watched him play. To McHale, only one of those crowns was real, and that, more than any number on a stat sheet, is why he could not stop praising him. Then there's Julius Erving, Dr. J. When McHale was a rookie, the Celtics veterans actually told him not to shake Irving's hand. That is how serious the rivalry was. You did not befriend the enemy. And early on, Irving even dunked right on the young McHale and embarrassed him. But McHale never lost his respect for Irving's greatness. He saw him as one of the best to ever play. And over time, the fierce rivals became close friends. The hatred on the court turned into a real bond off it. To McHale, that was the perfect story. You fight like enemies between the lines. Then you respect each other like brothers once the war is over. That was his ideal of how the game should work. That story matters more than it seems. To McHale, the Irving bond was proof that his hard code was not really about hate. It was about honesty. You could fight a man with everything you had, then respect him deeply once the buzzer sounded. The war and the friendship were two sides of the same coin. Both came from taking the game seriously. Both came from giving your full self to the battle. That is why McHale could be so harsh and so loyal at the same time. In his mind, the harshness was a form of respect. He only pushed hard against players he thought could take it and should know better. And finally, there's Larry Bird, the man McHale played next to for all those years. Their bond was real, but it was not always smooth. Bird was a perfectionist. He worked and worked and worked. And he was often annoyed by McHale's easy, joking nature. He thought McHale took his huge talent too lightly. In 1983, after the Celtics got swept by the Milwaukee Bucks, Bird called McHale out in public. He pointed at his casual attitude, and McHale did not love it. He hated being painted as the lazy natural, while Bird was the hard worker. He felt that was not fair to how much he gave. And there is a lesson hiding in that old argument. The thing that hurt McHale most was being called lazy. Being seen as a man who coasted on talent, he could not stand it. So is it any wonder that he now points the same finger at others? The harshest critic of soft, easy players is a man who spent his career fighting the label of a soft, easy player. He judges others by the exact standard he once had to defend himself against. His criticism of the modern game is, in a strange way, the echo of an old wound. He proved he was a worker. Now he demands that everyone else prove it too. But under all of that, the respect was rock solid. Bird praised McHale's defense over and over. He knew how special McHale was on that end. And McHale, for his part, accepted playing behind Bird. He took a smaller role so the team could win. He gave up shine for titles, and they won 3 together. That sacrifice, that choice of winning over ego, was McHale's whole code in action. So look at what links these 3. Kareem won and stayed humble. Irving was great and became a loyal friend. Bird worked harder than anyone and put the team first. Each one fit a piece of McHale's code. Each one earned his respect the hard way. But notice what that really means. Even McHale's respect proves how strict he was. You did not get his praise just by being great. You had to be great in his specific way. You had to be humble like Kareem. You had to be loyal like Irving. You had to sacrifice like Bird. If you were great in a different way, the door stayed shut. That is the truth about Kevin McHale. His respect was a locked room, and he held the only key. He decided who fit and who did not, using rules built in a world that no longer exists. So was McHale right or wrong? The honest answer is both. He was often too harsh. He judged a new league by an old map. He reduced Draymond to inches. He treated LeBron's confidence as a crime. He blamed Harden when his own job fell apart. He held Kevin Love responsible for a broken team. He could not let the Bulls have their crown. Again and again, his code made him stubborn, narrow, and at times unfair, but his hardness came from a real place. He did not invent his rules to be cruel. He lived them. He played through a broken foot in 1987 because winning meant more to him than his own body. He gave up shots and stardom to fit beside Bird. He set scoring records so efficient that no one has matched them since. He earned the right to have standards, even if those standards were too rigid for the world that came after. And maybe that is the fairest way to see him. Not as a hater, not as a bitter old man swinging at kids, but as a keeper of an old flame. Every era needs someone who remembers how hard it used to be. Someone who refuses to let the past be forgotten or softened. McHale is that man for the 1980s. He stands guard over a brutal, beautiful time, and he will not let anyone pretend it was easy or unimportant. Yes, that makes him stubborn. Yes, it makes him unfair at times, but it also makes him honest. He is the last voice of a vanished world, and he speaks for it without apology. That is the key to understanding the torture chamber. McHale came up in a brutal league. The 1980s were rough, mean, and physical. Respect was not given. It was taken in the paint, through pain. So when he looks at the modern game, he is not really judging Harden or LeBron or Draymond. He is defending the only world he ever knew. A world where you had to bleed before you could be praised. In McHale's mind, basketball was supposed to hurt before it honored you. That is why his respect was so hard to earn. Not because he hated the new players, but because to him, greatness without sacrifice was not greatness at all. It was just talent. And talent, he believed, was the easy part. There is something almost tragic in that belief. McHale spent his life proving that work beats talent. He was the gifted big man who refused to coast. He drilled his footwork until his moves looked like magic. He turned his long arms into weapons. He shaped raw skill into something unstoppable through sheer effort. So when he sees a young star who has not paid that price, it does not just annoy him, it feels like a betrayal of everything he stands for. He cannot cheer for greatness that came too easy, because to him, easy greatness is a kind of waste. It is talent without the soul that makes talent matter. Kevin McHale could be harsh, he could be stubborn, he could be unfair, but he was never fake. He said the quiet part out loud because he truly believed it. And whether you agree with him or not, you have to respect a man who lived by the same hard code he used to judge everyone else. He earned his place on that parquet floor, and he is still standing on it, telling us the truth as he sees it, whether we want to hear it or not. That is the torture chamber, and that is his code.
And I was an athlete.
It's amazing, even though I believe
Jerry West did more than earn his reward.
Really stresses running.
Jerry West could look at a legend and still think, he's unbearable. That sounds strange. West was the logo. He was the man on the NBA logo. He played for the Lakers. He helped build the Lakers into a powerhouse. He was one of the smartest minds basketball ever had. But greatness has a price. West paid that price every single day. He pushed himself harder than anyone around him. He never let himself rest. He never let himself feel good for long. And because he never let himself rest, he never let anyone else relax either. People loved West. People also felt a little scared of him. He could praise a player 1 minute and cut them down the next. He could build someone up, then turn cold without warning. He did this to teammates. He did this to coaches. He even did it to himself, in his own head, every single night after a game. And if West's fire already has you locked in, hit the hype button and give this video some hype, because this story only gets colder from here. West grew up in West Virginia, in a small town far from any bright lights. He was a shy, anxious kid who found peace shooting a basketball alone for hours. That quiet, lonely habit became the seed of everything he later built. It also became the seed of everything that made him so hard to be around once the lights finally turned on. This story is not about hate in a simple way. It is about something deeper. It is about a man who judged everyone, including himself, by one hard question. Did you respect the game enough? If the answer was yes, West would defend you forever. If the answer was no, West could turn ice cold. People online love to say West hated 6 players. They make it sound simple. They make it sound like West sat down and wrote out a list of names he could not stand. That is not the real story. The real story is harder to package. It is about a man so locked into perfection that almost everyone around him felt the heat at some point. Even people he loved, even people he respected. West grew up poor in West Virginia. He grew up quiet and nervous. Basketball became his escape and his obsession. He turned that obsession into one of the greatest playing careers in NBA history. Then, he turned it into one of the greatest front office careers ever. But the same fire that made him great also burned the people closest to him. This is the story of that fire. It is the story of 6 conflicts, 6 relationships, and 6 moments that show what Jerry West truly could not stand. By the end, you will understand why even the people who respected him most sometimes thought the exact same thing. He's unbearable. Here's the truth. The internet loves clickbait. Sports channels love to take old legends and turn them into neat little lists. Players he hated. Players he could not stand. It is an easy formula and it gets clicks. Other legends really did sit down and name players they hated. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar talked about players he never respected. Bill Walton named players he hated. Isaiah Thomas listed rivals from the Bad Boys era he could not stand. Larry Bird did something similar with his old Eastern Conference enemies. Even Michael Jordan has a video built around players he never respected on the court. Those videos are real. The quotes inside them are usually real too. But when you go looking for Jerry West's official list of 6 players he hated, you will not find one. It does not exist. That is the twist nobody tells you. West's actual interviews were almost always about something else entirely. He talked about the greatest players he ever saw. He talked about players who never got enough credit. He almost never sat down and built a list of names he could not stand. A careful look at the historical record backs this up. There is no real evidence anywhere that Jerry West ever sat in front of a camera and named 6 players he hated, one by one. The pattern simply belongs to other legends, not to him. Yet the clickbait formula is so popular that it gets copied onto almost every famous name in basketball history, whether the facts support it or not. So why does this story still matter? Because West did have a code. He did not need a list of names to show what he could not stand. He showed it through actions, through comments, and through cold silence. If you broke his code, he let you know, maybe not with a list, but with a look. With a comment to a reporter. With a door he stopped knocking on. West hated softness. He hated players acting too friendly with the other team. He hated stars laughing while they were losing badly. He hated people who mocked the players who built the league before money changed everything. And more than anything, he hated being pushed aside after giving his whole life to one team. Those are not 6 names. They are 6 wounds, and each one cuts deeper than a simple list ever could. Think about it this way. A list of 6 names is easy to forget. But a man who could look his own star player in the eye and say something brutal. A man who could feel kicked out of the franchise he built with his bare hands. That is a story people do not forget. A list is just words on a screen. A code lived inside a real human being, and it shaped real relationships, real silences, and real goodbyes. So forget the list. The real Jerry West is far more interesting and far more painful than any clickbait title could ever show. Here are the 6 conflicts that defined what Jerry West truly could not stand. Let's start with something that still happens today. Picture a modern NBA game. One team is losing by 25 points. The players on the bench are not angry. They are not staring at the floor. They are laughing. They are joking with each other. Some of them are even laughing with players on the other team. Cameras catch it. Fans clip it and share it online. Nobody on the court seems bothered by it at all. To most fans, this looks normal. Players today grew up together. They play together in the summer. They share trainers. They share friendships that go back to high school. Basketball is still a business, but it is also a brotherhood now. Winning still matters, but it is not the only thing that matters anymore. To Jerry West, this would have looked like a crime. West played in a different world. In his era, the player across from you was not a friend. He was the enemy. You did not joke with him. You did not smile at him during a blowout. You hated losing so much that laughing during a loss would have felt like betraying your own team. Losing was supposed to hurt. If it did not hurt, something was deeply wrong. West carried this attitude into his life as an executive. Even decades after he stopped playing, he still felt sick when he saw modern stars laughing on the bench while their team got destroyed. To him, it was not just a different style. It was disrespect. It was proof that something important had been lost. Here is where the story turns on West, not just on the players he judged. His standard was so extreme that it left almost no room for the modern game to exist on its own terms. Basketball changed, players built friendships across teams, social media connected rivals off the court. None of that meant players cared less about winning. It just meant they expressed pain and joy differently than West once did. The game evolved. West's rulebook did not. West could not see it that way. To him, joy at the wrong moment was weakness. A smile during a loss was an insult to the game itself. He never tried to understand the new culture from the inside. He only measured it against the culture he grew up in, and by that measure, it always came up short. This is the first crack in the picture of Jerry West the perfectionist. He was not just hard on lazy players or selfish players. He was hard on an entire generation, simply for living in a different time than his own. He judged modern joy by old rules, and by those rules, almost everyone today would fail. That single standard tells you everything about how Jerry West saw the world. Respect was not a feeling to him, it was a behavior. And if your behavior did not match his code, it did not matter how talented you were. He would still see you as part of the problem. It is worth noting that West was far from alone in this view. Plenty of older basketball minds still feel a version of the same discomfort whenever they watch a losing team smiling on national television. But few of them carried that discomfort with the same intensity as West, and few of them had built an entire career around treating every single possession as a life or death moment. For West, this was never just an old man complaining about a changing world. It was a basic measure of whether someone truly understood what the game was supposed to mean. This was only the surface of West's discomfort with the game's softer edges. The deeper conflicts were personal. They were with people he worked beside every single day, and the most painful one nearly broke him completely. If there is one name that defines the negative side of Jerry West's story, it is Phil Jackson. Their history did not start in an office. It started on a basketball court decades earlier. During the 1972 NBA Finals, the Lakers faced the New York Knicks. Phil Jackson was a tough, physical forward for New York. During the series, Jackson hit West with a hard elbow. It broke West's nose. That moment never fully went away. It sat quietly for almost 30 years. Then it returned. In a much quieter, much colder form, through the hallways of the Lakers' offices. By 1999, West was the general manager of the Lakers. He had built a roster around two enormous talents, Shaquille O'Neal and a young Kobe Bryant. He had earned the respect of the entire organization through years of smart trades and hard work. He had spent 2 decades learning how to build a winning team from the ground up. Then the Lakers hired Phil Jackson to coach the team. Jackson did not want a partner. He wanted total control. He wanted the locker room to be his territory and his territory alone. He wanted players to answer to him and only him. West, who had spent his whole career building relationships with players, suddenly found himself pushed to the edges of the team he had built. The man who once decided which players wore a Lakers uniform now had almost no say in how those same players were managed once the season began. It started small. Jackson would walk past West's office door without saying a word. No greeting, no nod, just silence. West noticed it every single day. He had felt territorial coldness before, from other men chasing power inside the Lakers organization, including Pat Riley during an earlier era. But this felt different. This felt personal. This felt like being erased from a building he had spent decades giving his life to. A man who once knew every player, every coach, and every staff member by name suddenly felt like a stranger walking his own hallways. Then it got worse. Jackson began controlling who could enter the locker room and when. The space that once belonged to everyone in the organization slowly became Jackson's alone. Doors that used to stay open started staying shut. Conversations that used to happen freely started happening only with Jackson's permission. The breaking point came after a game. West, the man who built the team, who had given decades of his life to the Lakers, was ordered out of the locker room. Jackson did it with sharp language, in front of the players. Jackson later claimed he did not realize it was West standing there. That excuse did not soften the blow. It barely mattered who was supposed to be standing in that doorway. What mattered was that the most powerful basketball mind in the building had just been thrown out of his own team's locker room, like a stranger. By this point in his life, West was already exhausted. He had struggled for years with stress, with panic attacks, and with the kind of burnout that comes from never letting yourself rest. He had given his nerves to this franchise the same way he had once given his nose to Phil Jackson's elbow. Front office work never gave him the same release that playing the game once did. There was no buzzer, no final score, no clear ending to the pressure. The locker room moment was the final push. West did not fight back. He did not turn it into a public war. He called that kind of fight a pissing contest, and he refused to play that game. Instead, in the year 2000, Jerry West walked away. He stepped down as general manager of the team he had spent his life building. There was no farewell tour. There was no big celebration of everything he had accomplished. There was just a quiet exit from a building that no longer felt like his. It was a quiet ending to a loud career, and it left a wound that never fully closed. West later wrote about those years in his own autobiography, and even with the cushion of time, the pain in his words never really faded. He described feeling completely alone inside a building he used to call home. This is where the negative angle becomes painfully clear. Jerry West was brilliant. He could build a championship roster better than almost anyone in league history. In the years before Jackson arrived, West had already helped build championship teams around Magic Johnson and later around Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. He had earned the right to feel secure in his own organization. But when it came to sharing power with another strong, controlling personality, he could not survive it. He would rather walk away from everything he built than fight for his place inside it. That tells you something important about the man behind the logo. His genius came with a limit. He needed control to function. And when someone else took that control away, even slowly, even quietly, it broke something inside him that never fully repaired itself. The same nose Phil Jackson once broke on the court, in a strange way, never really healed off the court either. 2 decades of championship banners could not undo the sting of being treated like an outsider in his own building. Looking back, the saddest part of this feud may not even be the silence in the hallway or the harsh words in the locker room. It may be the fact that 2 of basketball's greatest minds, 2 men who both wanted nothing but championships for the Lakers, could never find a way to share that goal without one of them eventually walking away. If Phil Jackson showed how West handled a rival for power, Wilt Chamberlain showed how West handled a teammate who needed something West could not easily give: emotional support. In 1968, the Lakers brought in Wilt Chamberlain to join West and Elgin Baylor. On paper, this looked unstoppable. 3 incredible scorers on one team. In reality, it was far messier than fans realized. Wilt did not feel like part of the group. He believed West and Baylor often ignored him, even when he was open for an easy shot. He kept his distance from his own teammates. He rarely socialized with them off the court. The 3 superstars shared a locker room, but they did not always share trust. Behind the scenes, there were even older wounds. Wilt believed Lakers executives once blocked a trade to bring him to the team years earlier when he was still playing in San Francisco, because West and Baylor did not want a 3rd star pulling attention and money away from them. Whether or not every detail was fair, the feeling was real. Wilt felt like an outsider on his own team, surrounded by 2 players who had already built their own bond long before he arrived. West, on the other hand, cared about exactly one thing: winning. He did not have much patience for emotional complications. He wanted players who could put personal feelings aside and focus completely on the scoreboard. Wilt's need for validation and his sensitivity to feeling overlooked frustrated West deeply. To West, talent should speak for itself. It should not need constant reassurance to perform. That frustration boiled over in 1969. The Lakers reached Game 7 of the NBA Finals against the Boston Celtics. Late in the game, Wilt took himself out with a knee injury. The Lakers lost. West was furious, and he did not hide it well. To West, that moment looked like one more example of a great talent stepping back at the exact moment the team needed him most. Soon after, reporters asked West a simple question: who was the better player, Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell? West chose Russell. He praised Russell's team-first mentality and his willingness to sacrifice his own stats for the good of his team. It was a clear, public shot at Wilt's character, even if West never used Wilt's name directly in the comparison. West stood by that opinion for years. Then, decades later, in 2003, he finally admitted something different. He called his comparison the dumbest thing I ever said in my life. It took him over 30 years to walk it back. By then, the damage to Wilt's feelings and to the public memory of that rivalry had already been done. That delay says a lot about Jerry West. He was capable of brutal public judgment in the heat of the moment. He was far slower to admit when that judgment had gone too far. This story is not really about Wilt Chamberlain failing to live up to some standard. It is about West's inability to separate winning from worth. To West, a player's value was tied entirely to whether he could help the team win in that exact moment. Sensitivity, validation, even an injury that genuinely limited Wilt's ability to play. None of it mattered to West in the heat of competition. Talent alone was never enough for Jerry West. You had to give everything, every single time, with no excuses and no need for comfort. Wilt could not always live up to that standard. Few people could. Even a man as physically dominant as Wilt Chamberlain found himself measured and found wanting by West's unforgiving scale. Years later, West tried to soften the picture of this rivalry, insisting in interviews that he understood Wilt differently than the public assumed. But understanding someone privately and treating them gently in the moment are two very different things. And West rarely managed to do both at once. His instinct for honesty almost always arrived before his instinct for patience. Of every relationship in this story, Kobe Bryant's is the most personal and in many ways, the most revealing. West saw something special in Kobe almost immediately. He saw a young player with an obsession for greatness that matched his own. He believed Kobe could become one of the best players the league had ever seen. In some ways, looking at Kobe felt like looking into a mirror of his own younger self. The same hunger, the same refusal to ever feel satisfied. But West also saw the danger hidden inside that same obsession. Kobe was not satisfied with simply beating his opponents. He wanted to dominate them completely. He wanted to embarrass them on the court. That same intensity did not stay pointed only at opponents. It bled into his relationships with his own teammates, who sometimes felt like targets instead of partners. A teammate who missed a defensive rotation could expect the same sharp glare that an opposing player might get during a fourth-quarter battle. At one point, early in his career, a young, frustrated Kobe went to Jerry West's home. He needed to vent. He told West something painful. He said, "My teammates hate me." West did not offer comfort. He did not soften the moment with a kind lie. Instead, he gave Kobe the truth, sharp and direct. He said, "I'd hate you too if I were your teammate." It is important to be clear here. This moment does not mean West hated Kobe. It means the opposite in a strange way. West respected Kobe enough to be completely honest with him, even when honesty hurt. A weaker mentor might have told Kobe what he wanted to hear. West never operated that way, with anyone, no matter how much that person meant to him. That was West's style of love. He did not wrap things in soft language. He believed that gifted people needed truth more than comfort, because comfort could never make someone better. Only truth could do that. He treated kindness and honesty as two very different tools, and he almost always reached for honesty first. Still, this honesty came at a cost. People around West, even people he was actively trying to help, often walked away from conversations with him feeling judged rather than supported. Kobe needed warmth in that moment. What he got instead was a mirror, held up without apology, showing him exactly how his own behavior looked from the outside. That mirror eventually helped shape one of the most dominant competitors basketball has ever seen. But it also reveals something uncomfortable about Jerry West. Even when he was trying to help the people he cared about most, his version of help often looked and felt like criticism. That is the paradox of Jerry West as a mentor. He could see greatness in someone before almost anyone else could, but he rarely knew how to nurture that greatness without also exposing every flaw standing in its way. He gave Kobe a mirror instead of a hug, and in the long run, that mirror may have mattered more. This exchange between West and a young Kobe Bryant became one of the most repeated stories in modern basketball history, and for good reason. It captures, in just 2 short sentences, the entire emotional language Jerry West spoke. He never pretended a problem was smaller than it really was. He never told a young superstar that everything was fine when it clearly was not. Some mentors protect a young player's feelings. West protected the truth instead, and trusted that the truth would do more good in the long run than any comfortable lie ever could. Kobe went on to become exactly the kind of relentless, demanding competitor West had always hoped he would become. He won championships. He earned a reputation as one of the most feared closers the game has ever known. But the road to that greatness ran straight through moments like the one in West's living room. Moments where comfort took a back seat to brutal, necessary honesty. Not every conflict in West's life was personal. Some of them were about protecting an entire generation of players who could no longer speak up for themselves. In July of 2022, on SiriusXM NBA radio, Jerry West heard something that made him furious. ESPN analyst J.J. Redick had argued that old stars like Bob Cousy should not be compared to modern point guards. Redick pointed out that Cousy could barely dribble with his left hand. He noted that Cousy never shot better than 40% from the field across his whole career. Redick summed up the era by saying those players competed against plumbers and firemen, suggesting the competition back then simply was not very good. To West, this was not just an opinion. It was an insult to everything his generation sacrificed to build the league that made modern players rich. Look at the numbers for a moment. Bob Cousy played from 1950 to 1963. He shot about 37% from the field for his career and averaged 4 points a game. He trained with almost none of the equipment modern players use, and he worked at gas stations in the off-season just to pay his bills. West himself played from 1960 to 1974. He shot 4% from the field and averaged 27 points a game, all while following much stricter dribbling rules than players follow today, and while still working summer jobs to support his family. Compare both of them to a modern guard shooting around 44% with the benefit of year-round training and modern sports science, and you start to see why West felt the comparison was so unfair to the players who came before. West did not hold back his response. He turned the criticism directly onto Redick's own career. He pointed out that Redick averaged only 8 points per game during his playing days, and that Redick was never able to guard the league's best players. West asked a sharp, direct question. Tell me what his career looked like. What did he do that determined games? It was a brutal question, and it was meant to be. West reminded listeners that players in Cousie's era worked summer jobs just to support their families, because the league did not pay enough to live on year-round. He argued that Redick and every modern player enjoying massive contracts today owed something to the very players Redick was mocking. Those pioneers built the financial foundation that modern stars now stand on, often without ever earning a fraction of what today's bench players make in a single season. This section shows a different side of West's harshness. Here, his anger was not really about ego or personal feuds. It was about loyalty to history. West genuinely believed the league's pioneers deserved respect, not jokes about plumbers and firemen. But notice how West chose to defend them. He did not simply explain the context of Cousie's era with patience. He attacked Redick personally, picking apart his career and his impact on the court. Even when defending something noble, like the legacy of basketball's pioneers, West reached for the same weapon every time. He cut people down to make his point land harder. He could have made the exact same argument using only numbers and history. Instead, he made it personal. The same way he made almost everything personal, that pattern repeats throughout this entire story. West could be right about the cause he was defending and still be merciless toward the person standing in his way. Other Hall of Famers spoke up in defense of Cousy and his era around the same time, but few of them attacked Redick's own career with the same directness West used. It was simply West's way of fighting. He never threw a punch without putting his full weight behind it. Underneath every public feud in this story sits one deeper wound. Jerry West gave his entire adult life to the Los Angeles Lakers. In return, he often felt like the team barely valued him at all. During his playing career, the Lakers were owned by Jack Kent Cook. Under Cook, West frequently felt like a hired hand rather than a true partner in the franchise's success. There was no warmth in that relationship, no sense that his sacrifices were truly seen or appreciated. He scored points for the franchise, sold tickets for the franchise, and built a legacy for the franchise. Yet he still felt like a name on a payroll instead of a person who mattered. Back then, free agency did not exist in the NBA the way it does today. Players could not simply leave for a better situation. West was stuck, whether he liked it or not. He later admitted that if free agency had existed during his playing days, he might have left the Lakers entirely. He thought about teams closer to his home in West Virginia, mentioning franchises like the Baltimore Bullets or the Philadelphia 76ers as places he might have gone instead. Think about that for a moment. One of the most important Lakers in franchise history once seriously considered a life spent somewhere else entirely, simply because he wanted to feel closer to home and more appreciated by his team. The man whose silhouette many people associate with the entire league almost wore a different jersey for his whole career. Years later, after West moved into the front office, things did seem to improve under a different owner, Jerry Buss. For a while, West felt a real partnership with Buss, something closer to respect instead of obligation. It was, for a time, the relationship he had always wanted with the franchise, but that relationship shifted too. When the difficult years with Phil Jackson reached their breaking point, Buss chose to keep Jackson and let West walk away. Buss did not even attend the press conference where West announced his resignation. After everything West had given the organization, the man at the very top could not be bothered to show up for the ending. It was a small moment in terms of minutes spent, but a massive moment in terms of what it said. This is the deepest layer of West's negative story. His anger was never only about basketball strategy or locker room politics. It was about feeling unseen by the very people he gave his life to. That kind of pain does not fade quickly. West carried bitterness about the Lakers organization for years afterward. Long after his playing days and his executive years were both over, a man who built championship teams with his own hands still walked away feeling like an outsider in the only basketball home he ever truly wanted. He gave the Lakers everything he had, and for long stretches of his life, it never felt like enough to earn the simple feeling of being valued in return. It is a strange kind of sadness when you think about it. West's name became permanently linked to one franchise, one city, and one organization. Fans everywhere associate him with the Lakers more than almost any other figure in team history. Yet behind that public image sat a private man who often felt like he was just passing through, never quite settled, never quite sure the people running the franchise truly saw what he had sacrificed to help them win. To really understand Jerry West's anger, you have to look at the opposite side of the coin. You have to look at who he actually admired. West once put together his own list of underappreciated greats, players he felt deserved more credit than they usually received. That list included Tim Duncan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Rick Barry, John Stockton, Dennis Rodman, Walt Frazier, and Dick Barnett. West built that list while measuring it against his own career, a career that averaged 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists a game. He knew exactly what real sacrifice on a basketball court looked like, because he had lived it himself for 14 seasons. Each name on that list shares something in common. Tim Duncan focused entirely on solid defense and winning, without ever chasing attention for himself. Hakeem Olajuwon mastered the art of protecting the rim and covering for his teammates' mistakes. Rick Barry brought the same intense, no-excuses energy to every single game that West brought to his own career. John Stockton played with toughness and intelligence, controlling a game without needing flashy highlights. Dennis Rodman did the dirty work nobody wanted to do, fighting for every rebound and every loose ball. Walt Frazier played calm, physical defense that gave West some of the most painful losses of his career, and West respected him deeply for it anyway. Dick Barnett competed hard for years without ever receiving the credit fans gave to flashier stars. None of these players begged for praise. None of them needed the spotlight to feel like they mattered. That is the real key to understanding Jerry West. He did not actually hate flash or talent or fame. What he could not stand was emptiness behind the talent. He could not stand effort without sacrifice or greatness without humility. The players he loved most were quiet, tough, and team first. The conflicts that defined his anger almost always involved people who, in his eyes, valued comfort, ego, or attention over total commitment to winning. This is the sharpest version of the negative angle in this entire story. West could admire greatness deeply, but only on his own narrow terms. If your greatness did not look exactly like his own, he often struggled to see it as greatness at all. A flashy scorer with no defensive effort rarely earned his praise, no matter how many highlight reels that player generated. A quiet, sacrificing winner could earn his deepest respect without ever appearing on a single magazine cover. So was Jerry West really a man who hated 6 players? No. That title is a simplified, clickbait version of someone far more complicated. The real Jerry West was not a normal hater. He was a wounded perfectionist. His anger came from the very same place as his greatness. He expected too much from himself every single day of his life, so he naturally expected too much from everyone standing beside him. That made him hard to please. It made him hard to work with. It made him difficult to fully understand, even for the people who loved him most. It also made him impossible to ignore, which may be the highest compliment competitive greatness can ever receive. But that same fire built one of the greatest careers basketball has ever seen, first as a player, then as an executive who shaped championship rosters for decades. The same intensity that pushed people away also pushed an entire franchise toward greatness. Again and again, Jerry West gave everything to this game. He simply never learned how to expect anything less from anyone else. And maybe that is exactly why, even now, so many people who respected him completely could also look at him in certain moments and quietly think the exact same thing. He's unbearable. And somehow, against all the odds and against his own impossible nature, basketball is better because he was.